we're a couple of minutes early, so we're going to give people about 2 minutes to hop on with us. I would recommend you guys, let's make sure the chat is going to be we really want to focus on making sure the chat is for questions, because we maxed out at about 70 viewers last time. And so if we have 70 people just chatting randomly, we can't keep up with the actual questions themselves. So we would appreciate it as your teachers, if you could just keep that kind of focused for us. You do have 2 minutes, so I will never tell you how many questions are on the test. I'm never gonna, it just doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. You'll find out when you sit down to the test. It's not gonna be something ridiculous. It's not gonna be 70 question test. So, I mean, illogical, how many questions are your tests generally on average? Okay. And so we're going to give people about another minute or two. I would say that I would recommend having your spiral handy. Okay. I would recommend having your spiral handy. And then I would also recommend potentially having some paper. So you could take some notes on some paper and jot down anything. I know somebody asked if they need to memorize every important document. We'll get to, as we go through the review, we'll kind of touch base on that and address that question as we talk about the important documents. You need to know them. It sort of depends on what you mean by memorize. So we will talk about the documents as well as some tricks and tips for helping remember with the documents. It's not open now. No. All right. I'm going to root here. 6:31. And we are going to go ahead and get started. As people are joining us, we'll just catch up. So I'm going to start off with some review on some topics that were from technically the last test in the last unit, but may come up as they kind of overlap into this unit as well. So we'll start actually with 1607, which is Jamestown. And one thing I tell my students is when you write Jamestown, you can make the T in Jamestown like a cash crop. That helps you remember that it has to do with the cash crops. Okay. And then 1619, obviously, we have the House of Burgesses, which is really one of the reasons Jamestown keeps coming back up, because we talked about the House of Burgesses when we talk about influential ideas leading to representative government. And it's the first representative government. And what, again, I told my students, our little strategy for remembering this is that I tell my students, draw a house with a burger in it Okay. And then it's got a little sign that says voted number 1. So remember, it's the first representative government. So that's just 1607 and how to take care of that. And then 1620, we want to remember that's the Mayflower Compact. And I tell my students, whenever we see Mayflower Compact, you want it to be almost automatic that you write MC, SC, SG. That'll help you remember the Mayflower Compact is a social contract for self-government. Okay, so that'll help you remember that this is and it's really hard because a lot of people try to say they get confused between self-government versus representative government, and that can be very confusing. But you just try to remember MCSCSG. So that all goes together, and you remember that that is your self-government. Okay, and then over here you want to remember it's the first representative government. This isn't the first self-government, but it's just some self-government that's happening. Whereas this is the first representative government. So it gets to be a little special. It's number 1, first representative. The other thing, and this was one that we missed a lot on the last test. One of our most missed topics on the last test was Spanish, French, and English early exploration and settlement. And we'll notice that our warm-up this week was actually on this topic to try to spiral that back in and make sure we're getting mastery of that information. So I've got my little chart here, and we have Spain, England, and France. And whenever we see France, we write F, 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 okay? Because it's France, friends, fur. So we have F, 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 France, fence, fur. And then always, whenever we're talking about exploration, we talk about the 3 Gs. Salvador. Thank you. So we talk about the 3 Gs, God, gold, and glory. See, he's standing all proud. And so we have, God, gold, glory. So for Spain, we're just going to put this is religion. They wanted to spread it. Religion. They wanted to spread it. Religion. They wanted it to be like freedom of religion. But they all have religion as a reason. That's one of the shared reasons. That was a sentence in our warm-up this week. And then making money. Spain wants to make money by finding gold. England is going to make money through agriculture and other natural resources. And France is going to make money through fur. France, friends, fur. And then glory. Spain is looking for glory. England wants to have pride. And France, nationalism. And those are very similar. But you want to remember that the big thing they have in common is the religious piece. The big thing they have in common is this. All of them came to the 3 Gs, but the Gs look slightly different. So that's like saying, I became a teacher because I like kids, and there's a kindergarten teacher, and she's like, I became a teacher because I like kids, but I like middle school kids, and she likes kindergarten kids. So it's the same reason, but slightly different. So they all have a reason about money, but it's slightly different. Gold, agriculture, and fur. They all have a reason about glory, but it's slightly different. But they all have religion as a common reason. Okay, so that's just one last look at our review information from our last test, as we will likely see these topics again. Okay, and then the next thing we talked about was we talked about all of the 13 colonies, why they were founded, who founded them, when they founded. We went through all 13, and it was a lot of information. I know in our class, we then took some of that information and we put it on a timeline. And I told my students there's really only 3 major things on a timeline you need to know. 2 of the colonies are related to our hot dates, and anything that's related to our hot dates, we have to know. Okay, Mac and Mills, I don't know. It depends on how much you retain information. I am covering the information that we covered over the last 2 weeks in summary. So I don't know what to tell you. Okay, so 1607 is Jamestown, which is in Virginia. So we see that's the first one. And then 1620 is the Mayflower Compact, which happened in Plymouth, Massachusetts. And then there's a whole bunch in the middle. Okay, there's a whole bunch in the middle. All right. And the ones that kind of stand out that we tend to see a lot are Rhode Island. And it's important because they have separation of church and state. And Pennsylvania tends to come up a lot too. Which is founded by William Penn. And was a place for Quakers. Okay. So those are the two biggest ones we tend to see come up as actually talking about the colonies. And that with who founded them in general, it's not as big a deal. The only founders that tend to come up are William Penn and our last one. So Rhode Island, I forgot my D. Rhode Island. In Rhode Island is just separation of church and state. Separation of church and state. Super play, remember, it'll be a video. You can go back and replay it at your own speed. Okay. Miss Potato, the Catholic one is Maryland, and we're going to look at just those three pilgrim groups in just a second. So this is just sort of the looking at the actual colonies. Okay, so Virginia, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Pennsylvania, and the last one is Georgia. And there's kind of a lot going on with Georgia. It's a buffer colony. It's a home for debtors. Okay. And the founder is James Oglethorpe. Okay. And the founder is James Oglethorpe. So this is sort of our basic kind of highlights of the 13 colonies. These are the highlights of our 13 colonies. And those will kind of like where we tend to focus our attention when we're talking about the colonies itself and those 13 colonies and how they were founded. Now, as we also talk about that, we do tend to focus on 3 pilgrim groups. No, Georgia was not founded for religious freedom. Pretty much nothing in the southern colonies was religious freedom, except for Maryland. Georgia is not. Georgia is buffer and debtors. Buffer and debtors. Okay. Connecticut, the only thing about Connecticut is the fundamental orders of Connecticut, and we will cover that when we get to the documents. So Connecticut's really only important because of the fundamental orders of Connecticut, and you need to know fundamental orders more than Connecticut itself. So this is our Pilgrim umbrella. Pilgrim is an umbrella term. It covers 3 major groups that come over. The Mayflower Compact is not a colony. It's a document that is written in Plymouth, Massachusetts. Massachusetts is the colony. So our 3 groups are the Puritans, and they end up in Massachusetts. Okay, and then we have the Quakers, and they end up in Pennsylvania. And then finally, we have the Catholics, and they end up in Maryland. So with Quakers, you kind of want to remember Quaker oats. Okay, Quaker oats, because Pennsylvania is in the middle colonies, and middle colonies for food. Puritans, Plymouth, Puritans in Plymouth, Massachusetts. And then the Catholics, if you just remember, if you know anything about Catholics, one of the prayers they say is called the Hail Mary. So if you can remember Catholics say the Hail Mary, then you'll remember Catholics go to Maryland. Okay? Yes, absolutely. Okay. There we go. All right, so those are our three pilgrim groups that tend to crop up a lot. Which brings us to one of the bigger pieces and looking at those the three colony types and how they're different. So we have three regions of colonies. And again, this was a little notes thing you did where you looked at the political, economic, geographic, and social of the New England, the Middle, and the Southern. And then this came back again in our relevant application where we focused on geography and economy. So we're going to just run across this really quick. And again, we're just focusing on the highlights, okay? New England is cold. All right, long winters. Rocky soil. Dense, that means big, thick forests. Dense forests. Okay, because of these things, and they have harbors. Because of these things, what you're going to end up having is they're not going to grow a lot of food. Mr. Brocken showed me something that he did with his class that I thought was pretty brilliant. All right, and what he did is he showed me. So this is like the three colonies, right? New England, Middle, Southern. And if you start to look at the Appalachian Mountains, give me just a second, sweetheart, okay? You start to look at the Appalachian Mountains, you're going to see this is like 10% mountain and 90% for growing. This is like 50-50, 50 mountain, 50% for growing.
Why you have that at the table?
This is like 100% mountain. So you can't really grow anything.
Why are you looking at you?
All right, hold on just a second. Sorry, my husband's not here to help. Okay, you can look one time. Okay? Yeah? Mommy's working right now, okay?
Okay.
You gonna go watch TV?
No. No, I want milk.
All right, go. Salvador, can you get Victor some milk, please? Okay, so this is our, all right. No, China was not involved in any of this. So this is our, so you can kind of see how clearly they're not going to be doing any farming in New England at all. There's no room to grow anything. They have a bunch of mountains. So instead of farming, what they do is they have timber as they cut down all the trees. And then they can take that timber and they can do shipbuilding. And they have a lot of trade. Okay. I just realized I put that in the P. So I'm going to adjust geographic. Politically, they were very religious. They have the Mayflower Compact. MCSCSG. And then socially, again, we've got Puritans. Okay, mostly Puritan. All right. The other thing we want to connect with is when you see harbors, you're always going to have port cities. So cities always grow up right on the harbor where the port is. Okay. Destiny. England, France, and Spain all came for religion in different ways. These colonies want religious freedom. That's good, yeah. The other colonies, you're not going to see that quite as much. So then we're going to do southern, and you're going to see how the middle is actually a mixture of the two. Okay. So here down in the southern, what you're going to see is it's warm. Okay, they have good soil, a long growing season. So you're going to see plantations, growing cash crops like tobacco, indigo, etc. One thing that's really important is a lot of students have been getting confused between a plantation and a farm. Remember, a plantation is where you might have 200 acres and it's all growing the same thing. All I'm growing is tobacco. All I'm growing is indigo. I'm going to spend all of my land growing one thing. A farm grows many different types of things. Many different types of things. Okay. And then southern politically, you have the House of Burgesses. And you do have slaves. And the whole point down here is in the South, it's really about money. And in the New England, it's about religion. Okay. Now the middle, we're going to see sort of a mixture. In the middle, we're going to see sort of a mixture. So first of all, they have a moderate climate, not too hot, not too cold. They have good soil, not too bad, not too great. All right. They're going to do trade and farming, which is how they get called the breadbasket. That's a pretty big deal. And honestly, that's probably the single most important thing about the middle colonies is their nickname, the breadbasket colonies. Okay. So, and then we have politically, they're a mixture. So there's some for religious freedom. And they've got some that are like democratic. Okay. So, and honestly, their social is really not that super important right now. It'll become more important later as it influences things. But really, you just want to focus kind of right here. And remember, they have farming, which is different. So on a farm, I'm going to grow a lot of different things. I'm going to grow apples and wheat and corn and radishes and like a garden in my backyard, but ginormous. So, excuse me. So fruit and vegetables and lots of different stuff to eat and livestock. Plantation, I'm growing one thing just to make money. One thing just to make money. Yeah. Yes, Rain. The breadbasket middle colonies are fruit, and the New England colonies are shipping, trade, fishing, etc. All right. The reason for settling the southern colonies was money primarily. But remember, if you just talk about England in general and France in general and Spain in general, religion is the thing they all have in common. Okay? They settled the southern colonies for money. Okay, friendly claps, we can't help you with your confusion if we don't have something more specific to reference. All right, so moving on. So again, once again, so far we have talked about reviewing information from the first test. We have gone over the timeline of some of the major colonies that we would look at. Okay. And we looked at our 3 pilgrim groups and where they ended up. And then we looked at the political, economic, geographic. Yes, Southern has the House of Burgesses. Virginia is in the South. Virginia is in the South. Virginia is in the South. Virginia is in the South, and it's the Virginia House of Burgesses. So the South has the House of Burgesses. And then finally, we're going to look at our tree of liberty here. Okay, and this is going to kind of go over our major documents, and we're going to focus on kind of 6 topics that we really want to look at. And I'll talk about the strategies we utilize for each of them, and then what they're leading to, what they're leading us to. Jonathan Edwards is related to the Great Awakening. So we'll talk about the Great Awakening in just a second. Rain, the Massachusetts is in the New England colonies. So anything that's about the New England colonies is also about Massachusetts. Okay, Pennsylvania is in the middle colonies. Pennsylvania, it's in the middle colonies. So it's part of the breadbasket, founded by William Penn. It's a refuge for Quakers. Okay, so here we go. So next thing we're going to talk about is these documents. First one to talk about is the Magna Carta. Is the Magna Carta. And our strategy that we used for this in my class is we drew ourselves a tiny little king. With like a ball and chain. Okay. So we have our tiny little king with a ball and chain because the Magna Carta limits the power of the king. The Magna Carta limits the power of the king. Okay. Client reacts. Literally the entire purpose of this video is to answer your question. So we're taking 2 weeks of information and narrowing it down as much as we can. We can't really narrow it down any further. All right. Okay. And then the next one that we want to talk about is the English Bill of Rights. The English Bill of Rights. And so for this one, for my class, what we did is we just drew a guy, named him Bill, and he's just saying, I have rights. And I have rights. So Bill has rights because this protects individual rights. So limits the power of the king, protects individual rights. Limits the power of the king, protects individual rights. Yeah, so the king thought he could do anything, and so they decided they're going to limit the power of the king. Next thing that happens is the House of Burgesses. And I already talked about the strategy for this one, which is to draw the little house with the burger inside it. That's number 1, because it's the first representative government. It's the first representative government. Then the Mayflower Compact. And we already talked about that strategy too, is MCSCSG. The social contract for self-government. Yes, Colton, exactly. So like Magna Carta limits the king, so he can't just do whatever he wants. And then the next one we have is the Fundamental Orders of Connecticut. And it's a super long one. Fundamental Orders of Connecticut. And this is what we do in my class. And I'm going to teach you Mr. Brockins too. So in my class, what we do is FOC equals FOC. The Fundamental Orders of Connecticut is the first official constitution. The Fundamental Orders of Connecticut is the first official constitution. Okay? Now, Jamestown is not 1620. Oh. Plymouth is 1620. Jamestown is 1607. How Mr. Brocken teaches it is, if you remember, Connecticut equals Constitution. Okay, so either way, FOC equals FOC or Connecticut equals Constitution. Okay, so either way, those are two ways of memorizing the same information, that the Fundamental Orders of Connecticut is the first official constitution written. Okay, two ways to remember the same thing. We would really encourage you to, on your test, if you see Fundamental Orders of Connecticut, either write CON equals CON or write FOC equals FOC, one or the other. And then the last thing that we talked about here is the Great Awakening. And with the Great Awakening, our strategy for this is choice and voice. So if I have a choice in my religion, I should have a voice in my government. No, go by yourself, okay. If I have a choice in my religion, I get a voice in my government. Abby?
Yeah.
Can you go with us out, Victor, please? Choice in my government, I get a choice in my religion, I get a voice in my government. Okay. So the first constitution is just literally a constitution just says, hey, everybody, this is exactly how our government's going to work. This is how we're going to write laws. This is how we're going to elect people. This is how we're going to change laws if we don't like them. This is how we're going to get rid of people if we think they're doing a bad job. It's just how the government works. It doesn't list any specific freedoms at that in that constitution. Okay, and we'll get to what we have now, but the Fundamental Orders of Connecticut is the first time they sat down and said, let's write a whole big rule book for how the government works. Okay, a whole big rule book for how the government works. Okay. So somebody asked again about the Great Awakening. Remember, the Great Awakening is a religious revival movement where these big preachers like Jonathan Edwards were going out and giving these big sermons to everybody, and everybody was getting really fired up about religion. And one of the things that the religious guys were saying was, everyone's equal to God. Everyone is equal to God in the eyes of God, not equal as God, but equal in the eyes of God. Everyone's equal in the eyes of God. So everybody started thinking, wait a second, if we're all equal in the eyes of God, why is Britain not treating me right as a colonist? Why do we even have a king if we're all equal? So it's going to pave the way for the American Revolution, because people start changing the way they think about government. Because of a religious choice, they start to have a political voice. The religious voice, they have a political voice. Okay? And all of this is leading us to our representative government. Okay, so all these different documents are leading us to representative government. All these different documents are leading us to representative government. So the hardest thing about social studies is what I told my class today is you have to kind of look at everything we learn from two perspectives. First, what is it? The Magna Carta is a document that limits the power of the king. Second, what effect does it have? Well, it's going to lead to representative government. Okay? The English Bill of Rights lists people's rights, and it's going to lead to representative government. The House of Burgesses is the first representative government, which obviously leads to representative government. The Mayflower Compact is a social contract for self-government that leads to representative government. So all of these are leading us to representative government. All of these are leading us to representative government. Okay. Rain, yes, that is Okay. So the last thing we want to talk about here is we talked about the little like rain droplets that help our tree grow. And we're going to just focus on one of them. There were 4. We talked about 4 things that help us grow. And we're going to focus on one. Okay. And that is salutary neglect. Salutary neglect. Okay. And salutary neglect, the tree is just a visual way of showing. Victor, Abby? So the tree is just a way of showing that all of these different documents and ideas are all leading us to representative government. All of these different documents and ideas are just leading to representative government. Okay, so that's just, the tree is just a representation of that. Not every teacher teaches it this way, but I'm a very visual person, and so I like the visual representation of the documents are like the roots, and then the tree grows, and we're going to get our representative government. It's like the tree of liberty. And one of the things we were just talking about is salutary neglect. Okay, and salutary neglect is a really kind of fancy sounding term. I know it's a really fancy sounding term. Okay. Okay. Who was the king's colonies? Well, all of the 13 original, I'm about to explain what salutary neglect. All of the original 13 colonies are the king's colonies. All of them. Massachusetts, Plymouth, they all belong to the king. They're English colonies. So they all belong to the king. Okay. Salvador? Please stop. And Tanner, I'm not sure why you're, no, Tanner, Napoleon is not in power at this time. So England and France are just fighting because they don't like each other and they want each other's stuff. So salutary neglect is when someone in charge doesn't enforce the rules and it makes people happy. Okay? So what I like to tell my students is you think about classroom A and classroom B. And both of them are Goodson. So they both have the same rule that you're not supposed to use your cell phone during class. And in classroom A, the teacher enforces the rule and says, and if you think she sees you with your phone, she takes it right up. And in classroom B, the teacher does not enforce the rule. And if they see your phone, they kind of just ignore it and move on. Most students are probably going to be happier in classroom B, where the teacher is not enforcing the rules. The teacher is neglecting to enforce the law. They're neglecting the law. So salutary neglect is when the people in charge don't enforce the rules and people like it. Okay? So not only are people not following the law, but nobody's getting in trouble for it. Okay? Not only are people not really following the law, but nobody's getting in trouble for it. So England, remember, England has the Navigation Acts that say you can only trade with England, you can't trade with France or Spain. They have mercantilism. Remember, we've got mercantilism going here. Okay, where this is England, Africa, America, all right, and we're doing raw goods. And we're doing like iron and weapons. And then over here, we're sending slaves. Okay, and that's the triangle trade. And in order to regulate the triangle trade, they pass a bunch of navigation acts. And the navigation acts say things like you can't trade with France. France is not in our triangle. You can't trade with Spain. Spain's not in our triangle. But they kind of break those rules and nobody cares. and nobody cares. Okay. Yeah, neglecting is rejecting, not paying attention to. Okay. Neglecting is ignoring. So ignoring the laws. So when somebody ignores something, it makes you happy that they ignored it. Okay. Like if you've got a big old, like zit on your face and I neglect to mention the zit, I do not mention the zit, that might make you happy. That might be salutary neglect. Okay. Rain, remember that these past 2 weeks, we have been talking about a 140-year time period. Okay. So the entire amount of time it takes to set up all of these colonies, to have mercantilism grow, triangle trade, Mayflower Compact, House of Burgesses, Fundamental Orders of Connecticut, Great Awakening, 140 years. So they go through a lot of different kings in that time. Who the king is not important yet. Who the king is not important yet. You just need to know the King of England, one after the other. None of them are really enforcing these laws because they're all busy doing other things. Okay. All right. So King James is king when Jamestown is founded in 1607. But remember, Georgia is not founded until 1732 or something like that. So obviously King James is not still king 110 years later. All right. So now we're going to transition to, we've covered all of the information. Yes, mercantilism was the snack activity where you gave us the raw materials and then we were going to make you buy the manufactured goods. Okay, Wyatt, I just said it doesn't matter who the king is, so don't worry about who the king is. Okay? No, you don't like mercantilism. Mercantilism bad. You give us the raw goods, and then we're charging you $3 to $5 for the snack bags. Okay? And then telling you you're not allowed to buy snack bags from anybody else, only us. Right? Oh, sorry. Mercantilism. So mercantilism is just the idea that the colonies exist for Britain to make money, for Britain to grow in wealth. The entire reason for the ruler of England to want to have colonies is so that the ruler of England can get rich. And they do this by the colonies send raw goods, okay? And in return, the raw goods go to England and they send them to factories and they make those raw goods into a material and then they sell it back to the colonies. Just like you gave us the ingredients for the Chex Mix, we sat down, we turned it into Chex Mix, and then we tried to sell it back to you. So that is the cycle of mercantilism. You're going to give me stuff and I'm going to sell it back to you so I can make a lot of money off of it. Okay. So cash crops. Yes, the South. The South, we're talking about good, warm climate. Okay. They have cash crops on their plantations. Cash crops on their plantations. Mr. Rick Hansen, I can address your question after the very end of this, but cash crops on plantations. So they're growing tobacco is the primary one that we've talked about because tobacco saves Jamestown. They're also growing indigo, and they're making a lot of money selling these cash crops for money. Okay. Cash crops is the South. Warm climate, good soil for growing cash crops. How you study really depends on you. So we've given you a lot of different tools. You have the teak questions that should be taped in your spiral for Unit 2. You can go through those teak questions and try to use the notes in your spiral to answer them. Abigail. And you can use the spiral to answer them. So that's a way to like quiz yourself. You can go back and as you're watching this video, pause it and let's look at specific pieces of information. What I like to do when I study is I get a blank piece of paper And I will just start writing strategies. Like I'll write MCSCSG and I'll just label it Mayflower Compact. So if I see Mayflower Compact, I write this strategy. If I see this, I'll write this strategy. If I see this, I'll write this strategy. Refrigerator, no, I wasn't going to go over that because Mr. Brock and Mr. Boyko and I all have different page numbers for our spirals. So if I gave that information out based on my spiral, it wouldn't necessarily be the same for anybody else. But if you get your teaks questions, we can address any that you're not sure about. Middle colonies is the breadbasket. Middle colonies is the breadbasket. Mayflower Compact is a social contract for self-government. The two major, there's only two dates that you have to have like memorized right now. That's 1607 Jamestown, 1620 Mayflower Compact. Okay, those are the only two dates you have to have memorized. And partially because again, we're covering 150 years of history in 2 weeks. So you want to know, I told my students, you need to know Georgia is the last colony. You need to know Georgia is the last colony. You need to know 1607, you need to know 1620. Okay. Jamestown is in the Virginia colony, which is in the southern region. Jamestown is in the Virginia colony, which is in the southern region. And you can remember that. You can remember that by remembering that Jamestown grows tobacco. We turn the T in James into a little tobacco plant, and tobacco is a cash crop, and cash crops are grown in the South. Spain, England, and France all have to do with religion, yes. The first colony is Virginia, Jamestown, Virginia. Jamestown is the first permanent English colony. It is located in Virginia, so Virginia gets to be the first colony. I'm going to be totally honest. I don't have a copy of the teak thing with me. So if you have questions off your teaks, please ask them. But don't just list them all because there's like 10 of them. So look at them, ask yourself if you can answer them. And if you can't answer it, then some of them are really straightforward. Mayflower Compact is 1620. Yes. Oh, good idea. 1620 has 2 mirrors on your compact. You got the zoom in mirror so you can see up close and your regular mirror. Jamestown is the one that sold tobacco. Yes. Okay, so middle colonies, again, it's the breadbasket colonies. They grow food, they're farming. Food, farming, breadbasket. They grow bread, it's the breadbasket colonies. New England and Middle both have harbors. New England and Middle both have harbors. Okay. And so like you get a lot of port cities there because remember New York City is in the middle colonies, and obviously New York City is one of the most important harbors and port cities that we have still to this day. So New York, but Boston is a really big important one, and that's in the New England colonies in Massachusetts. So New England and Middle both have harbors. So, you know, you think of the coastline, and the coast is like in and out like this, and they got little cities all along the coast because everywhere there's a harbor, you put a city, and the ships come into that city, drop off the goods, and people can come to the city to buy stuff. Harbors are good for fish. A harbor doesn't travel anywhere. So like, hold on, let me, England, Atlantic. And you have the coast, and I'm like zooming in here. So harbors are just like indents. Okay, so you see these like indents, and then they'll put these little cities all along these like indents. Okay, so the dots are like the cities. because you can park your boat in these, and that's good for trade. So that's how New York City becomes a major city, is because they have a big giant harbor that you can park hundreds of boats in at the same time, and they drop their goods off in New York, and then people would come to the city to buy stuff. Okay. Yeah, the middle colonies are sort of a mix of the New England and Southern colonies, with the exception of the fact that they are the breadbasket colonies, which is what makes them special. The fact that they're the breadbasket is what makes them special. Nobody else is the breadbasket, just them. Yes, they're all right on the Atlantic Ocean, so they all have good access to water. But the Southern colonies have rivers to access the water. They don't have very good harbors. So they have their rivers, and the boats would sail up like a river or whatever. But they don't have very good harbors. Okay. But they have access to water, just no harbors in the South. No harbors in the South. Whaling is only in New England. Whaling is only in New England. House of Burgesses is Southern. It's Jamestown. Remember, Jamestown grows tobacco. So they are in the Southern colonies. So they are at House of Burgesses, happens in Jamestown. So the House of Burgesses is in the Southern colonies too. Okay. Any other questions? We're at about 52 minutes right now. Give it probably about another 3 minutes. Puritans are a religious group that were escaping persecution in England and came across the Atlantic Ocean and landed in Plymouth, Massachusetts. And they settled in Plymouth, Massachusetts. Catholics are a religious group escaping persecution in England, and they came across the open and landed in Maryland. Okay. So they're all different. Puritans, Quakers, and Catholics are all different types of pilgrims. Pilgrim is just a word for a person who leaves the country for religious reasons. So Puritans go to Massachusetts, the Quakers go to Pennsylvania, and Catholics go to Maryland. And you can remember Maryland because Catholics say something called the Hail Mary. Southern colonies do not have big cities. They have smaller cities that are more spread out because of that plantation. Good. What other final questions can we answer? Super play, you need to know the 3 pilgrim groups. You need to know the Puritans go to Massachusetts, the Quakers go to Pennsylvania, and the Catholics go to Maryland. Okay. Maryland is the place for Catholics. What side is the Atlantic Ocean on? It's on the eastern side of the United States. Quakers wanted peace and equality. That is right. Okay. Remember, I tell my students, when they cross the ocean, so they're in England, and their story begins at the beginning of the alphabet because they cross the Atlantic Ocean and they run into the Appalachian Mountains. So we're crossing from England in the east, and it's Atlantic and Appalachian. What other questions can we answer? Yes, superplay, that's right. Salutary neglect is when someone is in charge and they have laws, but they don't enforce them. Quakers are a pilgrim group that settle in Pennsylvania. Quakers are a pilgrim group that settle in Pennsylvania. Yeah, you can think Quaker oats, and oats are something you eat, and that's the breadbasket colonies. So Pennsylvania, Quakers end up in Pennsylvania because that's the middle colonies. Yes, triangle trade is still occurring during this time. That's how everybody's making all their money. Let me find my triangle trade picture. Okay, triangle trade is occurring during this time. So they're sending raw goods, they're sending stuff to Africa, and then Africa is sending slaves to the colonies. Mac and Mills, if you would like to see a summary of what you need to know, please watch the previous 56 minutes of this video. I already took, the whole video is us taking 2 weeks worth of learning and summarizing it down to 45 minutes. We can't really summarize further than that. You need to know what happened in the 140 years between 1607 and the American Revolution. A lot about, do I need to memorize? I don't know. Is memorizing it the only way you'll remember it? If so, then yeah. If you can remember things in other ways, if like drawing the picture, then practice drawing the picture. So yes, Protestants are the ones leaving Catholicism, but that's not, like, just remember there's 3 pilgrim groups. Puritans go to Massachusetts, Quakers go to Pennsylvania, Catholics go to Maryland. Connecticut had the first constitution. And you can remember that C-O-N, Connecticut Constitution, or you can remember the FOC is the FOC. The first fundamental orders of Connecticut is the first official constitution. Connecticut equals constitution. Were there slaves in Georgia when Georgia was founded? I mean, probably not right away, but there were slaves in Georgia pretty quickly because they're growing cash crops. But Georgia, what you need to know is it's a buffer colony, it's founded for debtors, and it's last. Buffer colony, founded for debtors, and it's last. Okay? The Great Awakening is a religious revival movement that leads to political activity and interest. So it's choice and voice. Religious choice leads to political voice. Religious choice leads to political voice. Okay? These are the 6 things that are on the roots of the tree. All of these things lead us to representative government. The Magna Carta limits the power of the king. The English Bill of Rights lists out the individual rights. The House of Burgesses is the first representative government. The Mayflower Compact is a social contract for self-government. The Fundamental Orders of Connecticut is the first official constitution. And the Great Awakening is a religious movement that creates political action. So the Pilgrim groups are the Puritans, the Quakers, and the Catholics. Puritans go to Massachusetts, Quakers go to Pennsylvania, the Catholics go to Maryland. House of Burgesses is in Jamestown in Virginia. And we are about 15 seconds away from the 1 hour mark. So we are going to go ahead and wrap it up there. If you're just joining us and you came in a little bit later, Super Play. I drew a picture of it. I've repeated it now 10 times. So yeah, I would probably say that knowing that's kind of important. Rick, no, I don't know what you're talking. No, nothing about the Bermuda Triangle. It's not related to this. You're welcome. Okay. 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 All right. We are heading out. Feel free to watch the video again. And good luck on the test tomorrow. A fortnight of information. That's so funny. Okay. Yes, we are out. We're out. Goodbye, everybody. Feel free to watch it at your own pace.